Hello, well, thanks for stopping by. This is going to be hopefully a pretty short video where I talk about a book called I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Iain Reid, which is the basis for the new movie of the same name that's coming out on Netflix this Friday, directed by Charlie Kaufman. If you saw my video on Charlie Kaufman's past work and his common themes and all that kind of stuff, I mentioned at the very end that I wanted to talk about the book because I just finished it a few days ago, and I thought it would be kind of fun and hopefully kind of interesting to do a short review of the book. Not so much analysis, so don't come looking for really deep interpretation of the themes, even though the themes are kind of just worn right on the sleeves. I just want to talk about my impressions of the book. Definitely very personal and subjective and biased, as most reviews are, so keep that in mind. And before we actually get into any of the nitty-gritty stuff in the book, I wanted to mention that I had certain expectations for the book that were mostly set by the trailer for the upcoming movie. Now, the trailer kind of made the story look like a horror thing. I never expected it to be that, especially since Charlie Kaufman is involved. That's not really his MO, so I wasn't expecting that, but I was expecting that it would be really well written and have just a very interesting story that would deal with really heavy, big-time themes, right? That made sense to me because, for one, Charlie Kaufman seems like he's really well read. He wrote a book that I hadn't even heard about until a couple days ago. He knows his stuff, and he definitely likes stories that are a bit out there, stories that use different methods in terms of conveying narrative and character and all that different kind of stuff, because that's been a big part of his work as well in Hollywood. So I had expectations that this would be something different, and in general, I'm pretty disconnected from the contemporary literary community. I don't really know who the hip young authors are right now, so I was completely unaware of this guy and of this book. Iain Reid, he's a Canadian author. I think this is his debut novel, so it's impressive that it got picked up. It looks like a somewhat big publisher, and that it's been doing so well. It definitely has some really positive blurbs, some of which I take issue with, but that's for a bit later. So those were my expectations going into it. Now, I want to start with just a few of the really positive things that I can say about the book. I think, in particular, the way that the parents are written. So we have, our main cast is a girlfriend and a boyfriend. They're in a car for the first half of the book, traveling to the boyfriend's parents' house on a farm, kind of in the middle of nowhere. The way those parents are written is really nice. Really, really cool, weird. You get hints of bigger problems that we don't really get to see, which is always fun, just implying larger stuff rather than spelling everything out, I think is really great, and a really great way to write characters in general. All that stuff is great. Atmosphere in general is pretty cool. The idea that most of it's about, for most of the time, they're in a little car, middle of nowhere. It's very dark out. It's apparently classified as a thriller, not my usual thing, but I can say that the second half of the book especially, very, very tense, and I loved that. I loved how tense it was. I loved that it kept me reading and got me to finish most of the book in a day, just because I was excited to find out what happens at the end, which is always a good motivation, isn't it? And yeah, that tense tone and atmosphere really kept me reading. Moving on to the stuff that I wasn't so impressed with. I tried to explain this in an earlier take where I was recording along to the video you're seeing, but the audio was bad, so I'm going to try it again here. There are two things, one of two things that I really want to see in any book of almost any genre, especially fiction. Option one is to have really interesting and unique writing on its own, like the line-by-line writing, the way things are phrased, the way language is used. If that's really interesting and different, great. I'm really happy. And then option two is to have really good story content, like a story that surprises me or uses a different technique or something, or has a great twist or anything. Great sense of progression, all that kind of stuff. And typically I only get one or the other of those things in a book, and that's fine. As an example of something with really good writing and not so great story content, you got Naked Lunch, right? It's a classic, and the writing is really cool, and there's some wonderful sentences he stitches together, but the story is non-existent, and it's not meant to be, but there's not much there for me. So on the other side of things, where great story content but not so great writing, maybe something a little more standard, like Jonathan Franzen, I guess. Franzen? I'm not the biggest fan of the writing, word by word. word, page by page, but he knows how to put together a cool story, I think. He's still not my favorite author, but he's clearly talented, and he can do a nice story. If I can get both of those in one book, wonderful. It will immediately become one of my favorites, but it's extremely rare. So how does I'm Thinking of Ending Things stack up? In terms of the first bit of criteria, the writing itself, I was waiting for it to get good and different and to notice some kind of literary voice. I didn't, though. I really didn't feel that. Maybe I have weird standards, or I really want something different and crazy, and maybe other people do think this is a really unique voice. I don't think it was. Nothing about it felt distinct to me. It just felt like a book written by a person. That sounds mean. It's not meant to be, but I couldn't check off option 1 on my list, basically. In terms of option 2, and I think this is the main draw for most people, and I think this is what gets talked about in a lot of the blurbs and reviews and things, is that apparently the story stuff and the twist at the end is really neat. I don't agree. I don't think the story itself is really that interesting. I did enjoy the tension, like I said, but for me it led up to a very disappointing conclusion, which I'm going to talk about right now. I don't think I've warned about spoilers, but here they come. Spoilers are coming, so if you're worried about getting spoiled for the book and potentially for the movie, I don't know if they're going to use all this or not, but I'm talking about it. Here we go. So the big twist at the end is all the other characters weren't actually there. There's really only one character. It's the guy. It's the boyfriend guy. Everything that we've seen, the book itself, essentially, except for a few intermittent sections between chapters, is a story that he wrote. He wrote down on scraps of paper before killing himself. It's kind of a wish fulfillment fantasy of like having a girlfriend, and the girlfriend spends all her time, of course, talking about the boyfriend and how smart he is and how different and kind of weird, and angry and all this different stuff. Apparently, the guy's parents have been dead for a long time already, so us seeing them in this narrative is essentially imagined. That's the big twist. And then it's over, right? And it encourages you, not so subtly, to like read the book again to get a different perspective on everything, now knowing that it was all in this guy's head. In terms of themes, it really obviously says at the end that it's talking about loneliness and like contemplation of loneliness and wondering whether it's really possible for a person to get through life without either common social interaction or a romantic life of some form, because that's this guy's big hang up, is he's really bad at talking to people. He's a smart dude, but he just doesn't click when he talks to other human beings, and he eventually moves away from other people in his life. I have problems with that twist. I mean, not the least of which is that it's essentially a Tyler Durden twist trope, and I don't enjoy that. And you know who else supposedly doesn't enjoy that is Charlie Kaufman, because he makes fun of that idea in his movie adaptation. His fake brother, also played by Nick Cage, is writing a script where like a killer and a detective and another character are all the exact same person, and it's portrayed as really goofy and tropey in that movie, but here it is, and apparently Charlie Kaufman has decided to this time it's fine, or maybe he won't include that twist, even though from the trailer it really does seem like it is going to be the twist in this one. In general, I thought it was a very unsatisfying ending. So without the writing itself being really killer and blowing my mind in some way, the story also disappointed, and therefore I didn't have a great time with the book, and I don't see myself going back to it. Unfortunately, it's made me question how the movie's going to turn out, and I'm not going to try to come down on it or act like I know that it's going to be terrible or something. I'm still really curious to watch it. I will be watching it when it comes out right away on Netflix, and hopefully I'll be talking about it here on the channel if I feel like it. Overall, disappointed. Part of that is the expectations I had for it, which is why I talked about those expectations at the start of the review. But also just, it does seem like the movie will add a lot in terms of tone. They've even changed some lines of dialogue pretty obviously, and maybe it will have more of a horror thing going on. I guess that could be neat. But overall, I'm having a tough time staying positive about the whole thing, and also in general, I mean, the book itself, aside from the movie, it's something I really wanted to like, and I was excited to potentially find a new, like, hip young author who I could follow and see what other books they put out and really get attached to their work and all that, because that's just the best, isn't it, when that happens? And I just didn't get that from this. It's definitely not as normie or as bad as, like, Girl on the Train, or like something like that, or Gone Girl, where it's really pulpy stuff. It definitely seems and feels smarter than that, I guess. Less accessible in a way, but in the end, it didn't catapult itself into the territory of stuff that I really like and books that I really come to love and want to reread over and over again to get something different out of it. So I just wanted to mention all this real quick because it's one of the few times where I've actually made the effort to read the book before the film version comes out. You still might have time to do it yourself, actually, and if you don't mind being spoiled, you can form your own opinions on it. And in particular, if you have read the book before, I know it's been out for a while, please tell me in the comments what you thought of it and how much you disagree with me. I'd be really interested to hear any of that stuff. And in general, what your thoughts are about the movie, which hasn't come out yet. Just tell me some things. Tell me some things about this book and about Charlie Kaufman and his work and how you think it's all going to line up if it has been released by this point. I really don't have too much else to say about it. And like I said, this is not a deep analysis of the book, and I'm not going to go chapter by chapter and really delve into visual symbolism or how that theme of loneliness is applied to different story points and things like that. Just a short thing to tell you how I felt about the whole thing. And yeah, overall, not such a positive reaction. Still really excited to see the movie, but unfortunately my excitement has been tampered just a bit. Thanks for stopping by, and I hope that we can chat in the future.